4 years ago, in my son's freshman year, we had moved to a small town like the year before to avoid some of the big city schools that we had been in. And my husband and I had both been working in the school districts, and we really didn't like them. We sincerely just didn't like them, and they have not improved at all since. That was like in 2019 when we moved here, and it's 2026. And after the few years of, we even tried a Christian school and things along that lines, we realized that the school districts and the school systems just were not working whatsoever. And so we decided my son's freshman year to bring him home to homeschool. And it's really interesting the backlash that people gave to me about doing this. And I'm going to discuss some of the things that we did, and I think I'm mostly going to discuss the things that I feel I did wrong when we did this. And I don't think it's what people think it's going to be. When we had did this, we had been working the normal standard school districts, and I had been working as a substitute, but my husband had been working behavior for years, and I did behavior before I became a substitute teacher. And, the school districts to an extent are not that bad when you're a parent. You have all the same days off as them. And, in Oregon, they pay pretty well, and things weren't, terrible. But our son really struggled in many things. And one of the reasons we started to realize that we really disliked the school district is the high push to put kids into special needs classes because of the extra finances that they will get from the state for that. And it really upset us. And I will tell you that our son did struggle to speak correctly for his first few years, and it kind of set him back. But we knew beyond that he was totally normal. And one day I went to go pick him up from the school, and he was talking about how he was using a computer to talk to write. And we're like, what on earth do you mean? Is this like an assignment? Is everyone doing this or something? And they're like, no. And we had learned that they had given him an iPad to do voice to text for him to start writing with instead of actually writing. And he was probably about 3rd, 4th grade, pretty young in this. And when we had went in, we asked him, going, what on earth is happening? Like, why on earth is my son having this sort of scenario? And they had never communicated this to us at all. He had been in some speech therapy, but beyond that, he was a standard normal kid. And they said to him, like, he doesn't know how to write and he can't write. So we've decided to put him on an IEP for unable to write. And the reason why it's voice to text is he doesn't know how to, use a computer and things along that lines. And this is where we're like, what do you mean he doesn't know how to use a computer? My husband had made videos for years, and we worked in a studio, and my son used to do some of the, I'm serious, starting at 8 years old, working in the studio, helping my husband record and working on computers and editing. And they both have these websites and things along that lines. I'm like, this is absurd. I go, what on earth are you talking about? I go, my kid, first off, he writes stories all the time at home, and he works computers and to the point of working in a studio for his, for his father. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And eventually came to the conclusion that it wasn't that my son couldn't. It was that he didn't want to. And the school districts decided to take the steps behind our backs to start applying more IEPs. And we immediately went, this isn't going to happen. We pulled it all back. We also dealt with, the whole thing where my son is a very chatty kid. He was very chatty when he was young, very energetic. And we, of course, had the conversation of he needed to be put on some sort of medication for being too talkative. Being too talkative isn't a reason to put someone on medication. And I would highly recommend that anyone who ever deals with this to go ask for the tests that they make kids be checkmarked on and try to pass it yourself. Really, I'm telling you, we are all ADHD in some sort of level. And you know what? Who's even worse at that is definitely a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid. And so dealing with the school district was a constant battle. But by the time we had decided to move into the small town, he was 7th, 8th grade. We decided to put him in a Christian school, hoping that this would go better. And to an extent, it was going better. But once again, they came to us and they said, your son's struggling with math. And I'm like, well, that's probably genetic. Who doesn't struggle at math beyond, geniuses? And I certainly don't qualify. I like to joke with people like I have a bachelor's degree and it is a 3.5 because it would be like AAC. Like you saw my math grade and it was dropping. Just wasn't a talent in that. And But when we started really dealing with him, we realized that a lot of the math he could do was really low and super below where he should be. And when I finally had a discussion with his teacher, I go, well, can I see the homework? Can we start bringing some of the homework home and I'll work with him and things along that lines? They go, no, we don't do that. I'm like, well, what do you mean? I can't see the work that my son's been doing? I go, so I understand where he's struggling and what he's not struggling with. It's like, we both work in the school district. We both know, we know what we're doing. It's like, why can't we do this? And then the teacher eventually acknowledged, well, we give assignments and they hand them in, but we don't correct them. And I'm like, if you don't correct him, how do you know he's struggling in math? Well, he can't do the current stuff. Well, no, that makes sense. You didn't know if he could do the last stuff. You never corrected it. You never handed anything back. And I'm like looking at these people going, I'm spending a lot of money on this. This is absurd. This is absolutely absurd. And so I said to my husband, I'm like, I'm sorry. I go, I'm really tired of working in the school district personally. I go, I'm really sick of the behaviors that I deal with in classrooms. I'm really tired of how the school districts don't step in to make classrooms be in control. And it had been getting exponentially worse. And I'll tell you now that it is the worst it's ever been. School districts are very violent now, even standard normal classrooms. They are absolutely out of hand. And it's a maddening thing to try to work in a school district here in Oregon. And I said to him, I'm kind of over it anyways. I don't enjoy having to every night untrain my son from the days in the school district to behave like the way we parent him to be. And so his freshman year, we brought him home. And I said, we're going to homeschool you. And I go, it wouldn't be that bad. When he was in the Christian school, his class was about 12 kids, which is pretty incredible. I go, but it's going to be just you. And you and I are going to work on this together. And he didn't fuss, which was really cool of him. But this is where I feel I made the mistake, is because people kept influencing and kind of hounding at us going, how could you do this? How is he going to socialize? Well, isn't he going to be lonely? It's like, he has spent his whole life doing school and you're just going to take that from him. And you get all this weird backlash and voicing of opinion. And one thing which is normally something my husband and I do, but we didn't. It kind of got into our head, as we never told people to shut up, go away. Who gives a crap what you think? And we really don't do enough of this in life. We really need to have a whole lot more of back off and mind your own business, but we didn't do that. And I kind of thought about it and I decided that, well, we'll do part-time at the high school and you can take some extracurricular as long as you can't learn anything, else. Like all math, science, English, social studies, and things would be at home. And he went and took things like, woods and carpentry and small engines and classes like that. I was pretty lucky because the teachers that I knew that he was going to go take, I knew. And so I wasn't that upset about, sending him into some of those classrooms. But on top of that, Oregon has a whole lot of curriculum that I just refused to have infiltrated into my son. And so he was to avoid that curriculum. But I do think that looking back, I wish I had just said, no, we're doing homeschool full time. And we're going to find means to, learn those things elsewhere. And it was a mistake to send him to school. And I will state some of the reasons behind this is because when you're trying to raise your kid and you have an idea of the type of human being that you would like to help him be, and parents forget that this is allowed. You're allowed to mold your kid. That is the whole goal of having them, is you're supposed to try to mold them and help them get past some of the things that you had to deal with in life and make life easier for them. But on top of them, make them moral and intelligent and have discernment and have some stoicness and be able to actually control themselves. But people forget that in high school, there's this whole culture that we've accepted that should be normal, and it's the most abnormal thing on the planet. It is a highly sexualized place. It's always a filthy type of sexualization, and it's like the worst you can possibly get outside of prison. And the amount of mixing of kids that are there, it isn't always a beneficial aspect of life. I don't know many people who look back at high school and went, yeah, that's great. And it's usually the football players. But most people I see now, especially kids that I see go through high school and have graduated, a year later, they look so much healthier and less haggard and less burdened by the weird restrictions that high schools, require. Like, I'll give you an example. In the high school my son was going to, the kids were told they couldn't work jobs. And if they worked jobs, they couldn't do sports. And it's like, who are you to give an opinion of anything along this lines? And it's that kind of overstepping that is a problem. It's a massive problem. But one of the things we dealt with is girls sending my son filthy pictures, which is very upsetting. And what was really funny about that is because for many of the years, my son never had his own cell phone. If he brought a cell phone, it was mine. And so they were sending me dirty pictures. And so that got nipped in the bud quite quickly. And I would tell parents and things along that lines. But the fact that, he's dealing with those sort of things when you're trying to raise a kid to be like, honor women and don't be sexist. Well, not sexist, but I mean, like, don't be over sexual to these girls and things along the lines and actually be respectful. These girls are trying to pursue, how are you supposed to be respectful to a girl who's filthy to you? It's like she doesn't deserve that sort of stuff. But on top of that, the amount of racist and dirty jokes and just the behavior that was brought home, I really wish that I'd said, no, this is dumb. It's a gross place. It's not that great. I can give you the same education. And I really wish I'd said no, not a chance in the world. And there's so many Christians out there going, well, by 7th grade, we put them in there because they need to be a light in the world and they need to go show their Christian values. Those things that you're telling your kids to go be, those standards in the Bible were meant for adult men. They are. Like the things where you like go be like a disciple. We're dealing with adult men that Jesus trained and then sent out. They're never in there to send a child or a young adult. And maybe back then adults could have been much younger in, like 15 on up. But in our culture, that isn't it. And our kids are not mature enough to handle things along that lines. And almost every single kid that didn't have a parent sit around on top of them, making sure that they were following the straight road. All of the Christian kids that I saw doing that are really far astray now. And it's like they couldn't handle the pressure. My son's school is 800 kids and he's one on his own. And so they had a very strong Christian group. But even among them, because they're infiltrated into a secular, system, there's a lot of pressure to still do all those other things that you really don't want your kids doing. And I really do feel the only reason my son didn't fall into a lot of that is because, first off, I stayed at home most of those days, and he was mostly at home. Like, he would take no more than 3 classes per term, and he would spend majority of his time at home with me. But on top of that, on the days he was there, I could sub, and so I'm like, I'm watching you, buddy. So many parents think, and especially moms, that if they've been a stay-at-home, around 7th grade is when we send our kids to school, and we'll just go back to work and back to our hobbies and back to our real life. And these are terrible decisions on people. There isn't a point really that a mom shouldn't be at home. And eventually, if your kid's in your empty nester, you should still stay and be a stay-at-home wife. And I understand a lot of women fight that. But one of the reasons I say don't fight that is I didn't realize that when my adult daughter got married and stuff, that I would still be needed so much. And it's such a relief to have these days that if she calls me, which is frequent, much more frequent than I was expecting, that I don't have to fuss with hours or work. And I can just be needed immediately as needed. And I'm just available for my family. And this is such a blessing. But by staying home with my son, one of the things that shocked me was when he would go to school those days, he would frequently be bringing kids home for lunch because they didn't have lunch or they didn't have a place to be or they were tired or things along that lines. And so we became like this refuge that I never expected to be by having him go to that school. But even as that wasn't the reason we stayed home. What that is a sign that parents need to be at home way more. And kids don't develop a time in which they don't need their parents. And we believe this with middle schoolers and especially with high schoolers. I don't know how many women I know now that once their kids were in high school, they picked up all these massive amount of hobbies, started traveling, started going to bars, started getting full-time jobs, completely abandoning their teenage kids because we have this mentality that friends are more important than parenting. And, they're getting aged, they're embarrassed of us and things along that lines. But By staying home, I didn't realize how absolutely brainwashed we have become to think that that's correct. There's a reason why behavior starts to crash around freshman year, and it has nothing to do with the kid. It has everything to do with the kid being abandoned by his parents and not having anybody at home. Most people don't enjoy being at home. They don't enjoy the loneliness, and so they go to the streets, or they go to the parks, or they go to their friend's house. All these places are basically unsupervised, or they go to sports, and they're being parented by the world. And why would you want that? You have children to be able to love and protect them and to create them to be stoic enough and strong enough to survive the world. And you can't do that before they're ready. Kids, it's like being an adult has milestones, just like as a baby has to crawl and roll over and has all these milestones that they have to teach before they reach that next stage of being a toddler and all these sort of things. Adulthood is a milestone. And we need to quit abandoning teenagers and middle schoolers, especially Christian ones, and start acting as if they can handle and make adult decisions before they're an adult. Adult has milestones. Adult can take care of other people financially and emotionally and physically. They can maintain a home. And majority of this is completely lost. And by staying home, it's when I started to realize that this is a thing. Like, I needed to be at home with my son. But once again, I was still dealing with the trying to kind of shave off the behaviors that he learns from the school and bringing it home. It was easier and easier to do as he got older, but I would say my freshman and sophomore years with him were really difficult because he's still trying to fit in at the high school and, well, being a homeschool kid, and those worlds just don't mix. And I would state that it became a lot easier his junior and senior year because, first off, there's a lot of maturity that happened, but because I was constantly talking to him about what's going on in schools, watching these kids make bad decisions and having the consequences of it, that by the time he was like 17 years old, he really started to see, my mom being at home and guiding me nonstop has shown me that these people's paths are destructive. And so he actually started to be able to make more adult decisions to avoid these scenarios. But it was an unwise position to put him in at a young age. And another thing is everyone talks about the socialization. And so we stick kids in sports. And this is where I'll get really, really controversial. And let's get something straight. I used to do massive amount of sports. I did them all through high school. I was into sports into my 30s. I used to own a gym. Very involved in these sort of things. But I will tell most people, I would never stick my kids in sports. If I had to redo it, not a chance in the world. I would never stick my kids in sports. The exception to that is I believe that learning to swim is a life skill. And so my kids all went through very in-depth swim lessons to the point of being on swim team, though they never did swim team. But the reason why that I would never make sports a part of our life again is because of the lack of any sort of skills that come out of it. The high amount of productivity that goes into it with the complete lack of anything that comes out of it. Maybe you're this best running star. Maybe you can throw the javelin, or maybe you're really good in, football and things along that lines. But a huge portion of these kids that are pushing so hard at this stuff end up being injured permanently for life. My son has his shoulder dislocated his sophomore year, and he got made fun of for it. The coaches were trying to wrap him back up and shove him back in. I'm like, the kid's shoulder's dislocated. What the heck are you doing? And they put such a huge importance on sports that it distracts from the things that are really important. I do feel that almost everybody I know that has did sports left with an injury that affected them the rest of their lives, but no life skills that came out of it, beyond maybe a higher pain tolerance. Well, you'll get that in life. The thing that I would have did instead, and there's one of them that I do value, is I put my son in youth groups through the church, and he ended up becoming a youth leader with the middle schoolers in high school. And this has been absolutely fabulous. It really helped him mature in ways that I didn't expect. But the other thing that I wish I had did is put him in things like a 4-H or some sort of club where a skill is created, and so they get to carry that through life. You're not going to get that in sports. And so, if you're putting in 1 to 4 hours, almost a day, into some sort of activity, maybe there should be a lifelong, reward for that. You're going to have a lifelong reward of knowing how to take care of an animal or put an engine together. And I really wish that I had not did the sports, because it's kind of like the traditional easy route. And what I've seen with a lot of that is like, sports tend to be the place where people put their kids because they go to work and they're not off till like 5 or 6. And so if their kid's there, they don't have to worry about it. And so it's like an older daycare to an extent. And I can't express to you how many times when I went to sporting events, how many parents were never even there because, once again, they're working. It's really just like this activities daycare that we give kids. But if you're going to really invest into your kids, have them invest into something that has a lifelong benefit, that eventually can work towards a skill, maybe even a career. My son has decided that he actually wants to be an elementary teacher. And so the years of being inside of the middle school youth group have become very beneficial. But I really do wish that I had started earlier, putting him into things that had more benefit long term, that helped him grow up, help him become more responsible and forward thinking, than these kind of mindless sports we throw kids into. And our whole society really puts a lot of love and time into sports. And I'm not saying I don't like them. I love to go to sporting events, but I'll state to you that I think they're a waste of time, because even myself, my years and years of putting a heck of a lot of work into doing CrossFit and races and all these sort of things, in the end, I don't socialize with any of those people anymore. I have injuries that I can't get recovered from. They'll be permanent the rest of my life. It changed my body completely. And one thing we don't discuss is the fact that when you're dealing with a combat sport, one where they hit, there is an addiction that comes with that. And eventually that ends up kind of following kids. And a lot of people don't realize some of the depression that comes out of that is like, if you dislocate your knee in wrestling and you can't go back, it isn't necessarily the fact that the kid's hurt that brings on the depression. It's the lack of having that constant body response of cortisol and adrenaline surging into that body, and your body is addicted to it. And it takes time to actually become clean of that sort of substance that your body creates. And it's not something ever discussed. So if I was to redo, looking back at my life now, I wouldn't even blink at a school, ever. Not even slightly. I would have never put my daughter into school, any sort of school. She, that was another thing, is in high school, she got into a very serious relationship. They had discussed being together forever. And then at graduation, he ends up leaving and she never sees him again. And to deal with that sort of level of depression with your kid is really brutal. And so I actually had told my son, don't date in high school. It's not worth it. And he got made fun of quite a bit for it. But he actually later on says, like, that's brilliant. He goes, it really helped with high school. He goes, I could blame you for not wanting to date instead of having all this pressure to date. He goes, and then on top of it, he goes, most people who I know break up and they don't want to see each other. There's this huge drama. It's like all this weird crap goes down. And he goes, and I got to avoid it completely. But, watching your kid go through a brutal heartbreak because of high school, it's not worth it. And it isn't biblical either. There is ways to meet people, but high school isn't the way to do it. I don't see where there's much benefit at all. If I was to start over, I wouldn't even look back. I would only homeschool my kids. But I would get into a co-op, and one that's affordable. There's some of them out there that are just draining people dry, but there's always free or affordable co-ops, or start your own. That way you're socializing with parents, especially moms, and your kids have peers. But a lot of things that's cool about co-ops is they tend to have a mixed age, which is more realistic for life. And I think that that's a delightful aspect of things. I would do sports, but I would figure out a way to have them be mostly playful and not hardcore competitive, or everyone's going to turn into a professional, because that's kind of how we treat sports now. We don't have like junior sports anymore. Everything is, you're going to be a professional. And that's too much pressure for kids. And, especially for growing bodies and things. I know a lot of kids who are definitely stunted because of the amount of obsessive work that they put into a sport. And so I would avoid most sports unless they were kind of, one things I enjoyed, we did parkour, we did trampoline gyms, we did a lot of things that had a lot of body awareness that came with it that was really beneficial without the high risk of injury. And I know when you say, well, parkour is pretty high risk. At a parkour gym, it really isn't. You have instructors, there's mats everywhere, and they get bumps and bruises, but I never saw the tremendous amount of in-depth injury that I did with traditional sports. And then I would have them do your work however you're going to do at home and have more time outside, more time in the kitchen, and more time doing hobbies and things on that lines and really learning some constructive things. But the number one thing I would tell you, and it's something that no one discusses, is that if you're going to have kids, and I believe you should homeschool, work your hardest. Is not only your hardest should be bringing your kids to God, period. But maintaining your family is close-knit at all stages, and don't act as if there's any stage in your life in which someone drifting off to have that be a full-time part of their life is an important part of their life. I think that most people don't realize how important it is to keep your life tight-knit and to keep your family as close as possible. Most friends don't last more than 5 years if you look at your lives. You have some people that are like, I've had this lifelong friend. Hallelujah. I'm so happy for you. But all my lifetime friends, I don't see them anymore. From when I was young. And yet you have your family your whole life at all stages. So I would hold grandparents very, very close and make sure that they're interactive. And I would make a lot of the outings a family-based outing. Another thing is I would say to people is to not, when kids hit graduation, stop encouraging them to go really far away. Stop encouraging these, unless it's like a 2-week trip somewhere or back, don't encourage your teenagers to go to long distance colleges or move far away or have these experiences where they got to go experience life and experience the world. If you look at majority of those, they don't end well. They really don't. Most kids fall away from their faith. They don't see their family again. And it's traumatic. I don't believe that the things that we're living through in life, sorry, I didn't say that correctly, but what I'm stating to you is that we just break things apart constantly. And if you're at home, make your kids be close. Make them be delightful and delight in each other and to be best friends, because that'll have long-term benefits. Put your family as number one. Don't teach your kids that friends are going to be their number one part of their life. Teach them that their family is, and eventually their spouse is, and that family, and teach them how to actually maintain family and being close, because it's something that's very rare. But I see all these kids now that their families are all broken up and they seem so lost and almost like emotionally homeless everywhere they go. But the last thing I would say to you is, as a woman, don't fall for the guilt that you don't work or you're not good enough or you need to look the certain way and, so be at the gym and be all these things. I would say surrender your life to being at home and being okay with it. Because I got a lot of guilt. I always feel like I was kind of a loser for not working because I used to work full time and all these sort of things. And looking back, the benefit that came from me being at home outweighed any day of work. And we had just as many adventures staying closer to where we lived as we would have when I worked and we traveled farther away. I like to remind people that if you live on planet, everywhere you go is a world-class destination. But do your best to just learn to let go and be in the role of mom and wife, sorry. And I don't even edit this, so good luck with that. But we get so much pressure to perform or to be a certain thing as women. And the only thing we really need to be good at is wife and mom. And when you're wife and mom, try to make sure you hold that family as tight as possible. That doesn't mean when they want to get married and they want to move away, you don't let go some. But it really should mean you guys still meet up quite a bit. But I would at no point ever give leeway to the world at all. In no way. I would state, hold on to your kids, be at all their activities, be a part of their activities, have a co-op where you're involved, and be that protector you're supposed to be. because that's what you're there for. And don't give way at any sort of way. Schools like to kind of almost pull car sales on everyone, but it is car sales. They get a lot of money for your kid. And if you're not there, they don't get that money. You don't get that money either, but you know what? At least you're going to have the long-term benefit of healthy, happy kids. You know, homeschool kids tend to have less suicide. They have less drinking issues. They have less drug issues, less sexual issues. They have an overwhelming amount of benefit from being at home. And we're lied to that that's not true. They actually have more friends. They're more social. They have more activity than most kids that are at a standard school. So the thing I would have did was at no time would I even go work at the school district. I wouldn't put my kid in the school district to the point I probably wouldn't even drive by it. Just forget it's there and don't feel any guilt and don't look back. And anything that ties you into that worldly scenario, just walk away from it. There's no benefit there. And there may be a draw to it, and your kid might deal with some of the issues of being made fun of. But you know what? It's better than the bullying that they get in school. It really is. I think we forget the amount of absolute vicious bullying and behavior that happens in school districts. We don't discuss how kids literally get into physical fights and things along that lines. And why subject your kid to that? There is a whole homeschooling world out there. Go find it. And all you have to do is research or talk to some churches, and it's there, and it's growing by multitudes. And so the thing I did wrong, I would tell you never to do. Don't put your kid near a school district. Don't put them in traditional sports. And don't take your eye off of them. And don't take that thumb off until they're an adult and reach the adult milestones. And you know what? For some kids, that's not until 19 or 20 years old if you're lucky. Some of them, it takes longer. And so your parenting stops when the parenting goals have been met and the kid exhibits that on a consistent behavior. And so that's how you know when to stop parenting. And eventually your parenting turns into advice to people. My wife or my daughter calls up for advice all the time now that she's a wife. And it's a fine line to work. But you know what? You get to mess up because you're Christian, so you get to be forgiven. But I'm saying, ladies, is coming home, I gave up working in gyms and friends and traveling really, really long, far ways because we were, tighter budget. And it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. Hands down. Best decision on earth. It solved so many things. It made my marriage better. It made my family better. I actually discovered some health problems that I was able to deal with that I never noticed because I was spinning out of control. It was the best thing ever. And it was great for my family too. My family is best friends now. And, we kind of weren't before. And now we're all really close. And it's wonderful. Like even last weekend, we're out having like a bonfire with marshmallows and things. Just simple things. And it's so enjoyable. Because it has meaning behind it. And that's what you're going to get out of homeschooling and being a stay-at-home mom and wife is meaning. And it's better to have meaning than memories. And majority of the time, those actually tie in. But I mean, I have memories from high school. I don't even like to think about it half the time. And I don't feel I got much out of it. And then I don't know many people who really did. But I think that everybody benefited the past 4 years from all of us being at home and hanging together. And it was hard and it was great. So don't doubt, don't look back and don't listen and don't care. And anyone who's talking to you and gives any sort of opinion, who are they to know anything? If anyone says, you know what I do? Who cares what you do? Go do that with your life. Leave me alone. They don't know you and they shouldn't be giving advice. So I hope you find your path and just God bless you guys.